From the tea rooms of the early 1900s to modern-day cafes, tea has been a powerful connector for women to take time, come together, and exchange ideas. Some historians suggest what transpired in many of the tea rooms of yesteryear laid the groundwork for the suffragette movement, allowing women to gather, exchange ideas, start businesses, and change their place in the world. So what better way to empower women today than by gathering inspiring entrepreneurs and leaders to share their stories over a simple pot of tea? Each week, our amazing women will be on hand to guide you on your journey. So if you're ready to be inspired, come inside and grab a cup. It's time for tea. Many women are uncomfortable when it comes to discussing money, even when it comes to their own lifelong investments. My guest today, Jewelle Bickford, partner and wealth advisor at Evercore Wealth Management, works to change that by empowering families to take charge of their financial futures. Jewelle, thank you so much for being with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, in your almost 3 decades of being in the financial services industry, it's a very interesting time because there seems to be this thirst for knowledge among women about their financial futures, but there seems to be this hesitation. Why is that?
Well, the reason there's a thirst is because 9 out of 10 women will be solely responsible for their wealth at some point in their lives. Women live 5 to 7 years longer than men. When you get into your 80s, there are 3 women for every man. So with people living longer in general, women have all of a sudden realized that they need to know something about it. That's the good news. But the cultural taboos are still that women are hesitant to talk about money. It's considered not polite, it's gauche. And it really comes from the earlier times. I mean, if we take the statistics in 1960, there were only 7% of the women in the United States who were single moms, and only 4% of the women who worked earned more money than their husbands. Most women really didn't work in those days. Now you fast forward to 2011, 25% of the women in the United States are single moms, and 15% of the women earn more money than their spouses, meaning that they're either the sole provider or the joint provider for their families. So they realize that they need to have some knowledge to perform well, but those cultural taboos still carry over. And then you overlay on that the fear. My studies show me that almost 50% of the women in the United States fear being a bag lady. By that I mean running out of money before they pass away. And of that 47%, the majority of those, 27%, are women who earn a very good salary. So there's an emotional component to this, and if you're afraid, you might as well, you put it off. You think, I'll do anything but look at my finances or my investments. So the cultural overlay and the fear cause women not to pay attention.
So how do you get over the fear?
Well, at Evercore, we ask the same questions of men and women. Everybody says to me, is it different for men than it is for women? But we get different answers from women than we get from men. Men tend to be, nothing's absolute, but men tend to be about performance, and women tend to be about the goals in their lives. Can I afford to send my children to college? Can I afford to maintain my lifestyle? Can I give money to charity? Because women feel passionately often about their surroundings, or women and girls, or charity. So you see that the answers you get are different. And so what we start with is a budget. How much do you have coming in? How much do you go out? Because everyone wants to maintain their lifestyle. And then we try to get them to build in savings, like paying your mortgage or paying your rent. It's just a line item in the budget so that you can build it up over time. And then, of course, we talk to them about diversification and the need for cash. I'm a big believer that the way you get over your fears about the markets with all this volatility is that you have a cash component in your portfolio so that you don't have to sell your instruments at the wrong time, the time when you're fearful.
So if there's a woman out there who has not started and she's
in her 40s or early 50s. Is that too late? I think women in that age range really do have fear if they haven't started anything.
Well, when you look again at the statistics, way too many people in this country do not have a nest egg for retirement. They don't have anything but Social Security. And that's really alarming, would be the word that I would use. So I say it's never too late to start. Wherever you are, so long as you're alive, if you can possibly save something and you know how to save and what to save and you can afford it, it's important to get started.
What is your personal experience that brought you to this area of wealth management?
Well, for most of my professional career, I was an investment banker. I was a partner at the Rothschilds, the European family, and I was the only female partner in the United States. And I sat at the table with men, and I realized that, and it took me a while, but I realized that my emotions about money had to do with my father. He was a very successful investment banker, but in my college years, he lost all his money. He sort of bet the farm, so to speak. So I was raised very wealthy, but then all of a sudden I didn't have any money. And that was very frightening to me. So I was determined that what had happened to me as a child or a young adult was not going to be what my life was going to be going forward.
And so the actionable steps that you took right off the bat, what were some of those steps?
Well, I learned not to overspend. I had an overspending problem, definitely, because my father was larger than life and we were seriously wealthy. So I never thought about a budget. I never thought about spending because it was always there until it wasn't. So the first thing I did was the advice that I give everybody now. I started with a budget, and my husband and I did together, and we put savings as a line item. And it was hard then because we were married very young, both of us, and I was not working, and we had children in private school in New York, and it was difficult, but it was something that we did. And then when both of us were earning more, we never spent our bonuses. We only spent our salary, and so our bonuses became our nest egg. But we were very lucky. Most of the people in this country don't get large bonuses and aren't in those industries. And so they have to be very careful, and they have to have financial advisors, or they have to be able to study so that they can look at which mutual funds to put their money into, because just being in an S&P index fund is also dangerous.
And so over the years, I would think in finance, at one point, you were the only woman at Rothschilds. So today, are you seeing more women in the industry, or is there still?
Investment banking is still notoriously missing women, okay? But the wealth management area is not at all. 7 out of 10 wealth managers are males. But it's increasing. The number of women getting in is increasing. And I think women are uniquely suitable for for wealth management because I think they're very caring. And that's not to say that the men aren't. But again, if men tend to be about performance and women tend to be about accomplishing their goals, another woman often relates to that very well.
Coming up next, we'll take a look at what skills are needed to make sure your investments last. That's next. So, Jewelle, earlier we were talking about women living 5 to 7 years longer, but that's going to change as we move forward, and we have to adjust, correct?
Well, the scientists tell us that the person who's going to live to be 150 has already been born. Just think about trying to construct a portfolio to last until you're 150. It's just not possible. So first, you have to check in with yourself and your finances every year, and with your financial advisor if you're lucky enough to have one. And a couple of years ago, I took my granddaughter to Tunisia, and we interviewed the head of Microsoft there, who was hiring local Tunisian kids out of college. And I said to him, what are the skills you need for the future? And can you teach somebody to be an entrepreneur? And he said, well, first place, 60% of the jobs by 2025 haven't even been created yet. All of the jobs in the marketplace haven't been created yet. That's how fast the marketplace is moving. And he said, so it's really important to learn these entrepreneurial skills. And he said, not everybody can be an entrepreneur. He really believed you are born with those instincts and with that tolerance for risk. But those skills, if you learn them, even though they're not innate, they will serve you well in a corporation in that kind of environment too. So I believe one of the ways to make your portfolio last is to think of new things you can do. And I have a professor right now who has a pension and Social Security, and she's just retired, and she has a very small nest egg by Wall Street standards, $100,000. And so I started talking to her about teaching music because she's a music professor. And she said, well, I really didn't think I was going to do that. I thought I was going to retire. She sort of had a set idea, 65, retire. And I said, well, you're in really good health. You could live another 30 years. And with inflation, your pension and Social Security probably won't keep up with your expenses. So she's thinking about it. And we've been talking about setting up a whole way that she could do that and get online and connect her with people so that she could advertise and get the kind of music students that she would really enjoy teaching.
Well, that's why I love entrepreneurship so much, even if you are within a corporation, because it's really this idea of thinking outside the box and looking for opportunities to grow and to change. And that's why I think it's a very interesting concept to think of your finances in an entrepreneurial fashion as well, because there are certain skills that you were mentioning before, which include collaboration.
I was stunned when I asked the head of Microsoft in Tunisia. I said, so what are the skills that you think you're looking for in this next generation that you want to hire? And they were not the skills that I'm used to hearing. Certainly they're not the skills that you would necessarily say someone who's gone to Harvard, Yale, or Princeton would look for, per se. He said collaborativeness. He said decisiveness, and that pleased me because being an investment banker, I'm decisive, but I had never heard anyone put that as one of the 4 skills you absolutely needed. And the reason was because the world is moving so quickly, you have to be flexible, but you have to also be decisive. So collaborativeness, decisiveness, flexibility, and then of course you have to have the technical skills for whatever industry you're looking at. But the technical ones, although very, very important, he equated the other 3 as equally important.
What are the biggest mistakes that women make with money?
Selling when they're afraid. I heard a legendary investor, Stan Druckenmiller, say, losing in the markets is not an option. There are always going to be times when you're going to lose money. But holding on to a stock that is a loser is an option. So you have to know when you're selling because it's a bad company and it's not living up to its promise, or because you are frightened because the market is volatile and you don't have enough cash to pay your expenses, so you go in and sell out of fear.
You just have to hang on.
Well, you have to know when to hang on, and as Stan said, when to cut your losses.
And what do you think, where should women turn when they do need advice? I mean, who should they go to?
Well, the population that is the most underserved are the people who have very little money, because Wall Street can't charge them enough to justify. So they have to be able to read a lot. I noticed that ARP magazine has something every single month or week, whenever it comes out, on your finances and what to do and not to do. And I've read them. And for mass marketing, I think they're really very, very good. And you can go online. There are all kinds of services now online. But the problem is, if you're not a pro and you don't have a friend who's a pro, online can be very dicey. You don't know who to trust. So for the population that doesn't have much money, it's really hard to know what to do for them. For people who have some money, Vanguard, Fidelity, all of those firms you can call in, you can tell them how much you have, they can tell you how to diversify, and I think they do a good job.
Can you give me an example of a woman that you've sort of coached along who's really flourishing?
Well, I probably should start with my own daughters because there's a very good example. I have 2 daughters in the film business. One is even her films have won Academy Awards, and she
Wow.
produced Traffic.
I love that movie.
Wasn't it
Oh
wonderful?
my gosh.
You know, being in the movie business, it wasn't necessarily conducive to savings, and so we have really gotten both of our daughters on a pattern of understanding how important this is and looking at their finances and building up their nest egg. But I have many clients. Evercore Wealth Management specializes in working with families and bringing women into the financial conversation. We do something I think is unique on Wall Street. We don't have a salesperson or a relationship person in between. We have the portfolio manager and the wealth advisor, and every client has those 2 components. And those 2 people get to know the family, get to know what your goals are, what your tolerance for risk is. And as I said, or if I haven't said, women tend to be on the either blended portfolio or capital preservation, whereas men tend to be more capital appreciation and maybe blended depending on their age. So women have less of a tolerance for risk in general. So we find that out first, okay, so that you can construct your portfolio according to what your wishes are. And we talk about drawdown periods. We talk seriously about, even in a capital preservation portfolio, you could experience in a 2008 scenario a 12 to 15% dip, all right? It doesn't mean it won't come back. It did, but you could experience it, and you have to be prepared for that.
Coming up next, more about money, but we'll also take a look at career and how to sustain your career in the long run. That's coming up next. So you have 2 children, you raised 2 children, you've had a wonderful professional career, work-life balance. How did you do it? How do you continue to do it? What's your advice?
Well, there are no 2 women who are exactly alike, but there are some common problems that we have. And I know there's a lot being written about, can you have it all? And my answer to that is, you can't have it all at the same time, okay? But you can have it all sequentially throughout your life. And I certainly have had it all. I got married at 20, had 2 children by the time I was 22 and a half. And by the time I was 35, I had a 15-year-old daughter. And my husband said, you've been chair of every volunteer organization in New York and the church, and it's time that you get your degree and you go to work. I hadn't even finished my college degree. So I went back to college to get my degree, and I started working for Mayor Koch on his fundraising for him, because all women who volunteer have to be fundraisers, have to raise money for whatever good cause. And he got elected mayor, and I got a patronage appointment. And the first week I was the assistant to the director, and in 6 months I became the director of the agency. And I was written up in the New York Times as a patronage appointment who had made the transition from volunteer work to paid employment. And I've never forgotten that, because I really think women have amazing organizational skills and creative skills that they use in their volunteer capacity, and they're just not being paid for it. So why not turn that into paid employment at any stage in their career? Then my second piece of advice would be that if you want to take time out, like I have a client who's a doctor and went to Harvard Medical School and Harvard Business School, and she lives in the South, and she goes in 3 days a week where her 3 boys are at school, volunteering in the local hospital. And of course, they're just incredibly happy to have this well-trained pediatrician. I'm not sure whether she gets paid or not, but at least she's keeping her hand in with all of her skills. And so child rearing is basically a short period in a long life. The time when you have to be home, whether you think it's till they're in college, so let's say it's 17 years from birth to 17, if you feel that way, or want to be home part of the time. It's a very small part of your life. So I advise women to learn to be entrepreneurs, as we said, to keep up their skills for whatever it has, and to transfer their skills from volunteerism into paid employment. The attitude of men about women in the workplace is getting better, but it still has a long way to go. The statistics are really that not much progress has been made about women in the workforce and climbing the ladder since 2000. The last 15 years, there's not been much progress. There's only 5% female CEOs who are, women in the Fortune 1000, and there are only maybe 17 or 18% women on corporate boards. So when we can finally enlist men as our partners for change, okay, then you're going to see a real difference, and things will happen at work that will make it easier for women and men to take flex time when they have children. And I wouldn't call it on-ramp, off-ramp. I would just call it that face time isn't as important as it used to be. If you can get your work done and you're at home, that's okay too. And when we enlist men as our partners in this sort of paradigm for change, I think you're going to see a dramatic increase in what women can do.
How do you get around that mindset that you have to be at the office at 9 a.m., show your face, stay until 6, 7 p.m.?
Well, I think you have to have a good boss. That's why I said I think we have to enlist men as our partners in this change. Because if you look at millennials, they're not putting up with this. They want their job to have meaning. I mean, there are jokes about it in the New Yorker. I've been here 3 months and my job has no meaning. I saw that in a New Yorker cartoon. Well, that may be a little short, but try 3 years. My daughter told me that she doesn't interview millennials who've been in a job for 3 years because that means probably they can't find another job because the average millennial changes so often. So if you want the most talented, they've probably changed their jobs within 3 years. So it's a whole different mindset. So the older generation who's in charge, the CEOs, male or female, they're going to have to change their mindset too to get the best and the brightest that they want for their companies.
And what do you hope for your own career moving forward?
At my stage in life, I love what I'm doing. I'm passionate about helping families. I have seen everything. I mean, widows who are totally unprepared, widows who have thought that something was left to them, but because they weren't involved, they didn't really understand it was enough to sustain their lifestyles. Children who are the children of very wealthy parents who are used to spending a lot and then they can't, the same problem that I had. I really enjoy what I'm doing and I'd like to do it as long as I can.
Well, thank you so much, Jewelle, for joining us today. It's been a wonderful conversation, and you're an inspiring leader, and I hope that we've opened some folks' eyes to how they can move forward in taking care of their futures.
Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. That wraps up this week's edition of the Working Woman Report. Be sure to check us out in the social media world. Of course, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and our website, workingwomanreport.com. Tune in next time for more fascinating tips by our amazing women. Who knows? Maybe you're next. See you then.